Hello, Rodney. I think people are enjoying these conversations, which we're trying to cover a wide variety of sorts of topics, some of which are contextual and reflect the often very difficult situation that we're facing here through the war and all the related factors of that. But also you're often bringing different dimensions of pilgrimage, and we obviously want to keep that as a high-profile issue because that's fundamentally what we are about. But pilgrimage has so many different dimensions to it, and the more you get into it, the more you realise the layers and the multifaceted sides of pilgrimage. And also, because we're not really open to groups, coming and visiting us, or at least have not been over past months and years, we have found, and you're finding, new ways of engaging with people. We're here in Jerusalem, but people want to know from wherever they are and maybe have their own pilgrimage routes. And I know you've got one of those coming up, and perhaps you'd share a few thoughts about that.
Yeah, I feel like I've looked at pilgrimage from as many angles as possible, and I've taken as a broad or comprehensive approach to the image of pilgrimage and the way it's been used than most people. And I love being here at St. George's and working with pilgrims on pilgrimage concepts. But there's probably nothing I would like to do more than actually just kind of consult people who are on pilgrimage, to talk people through on initiatives, whether somebody's creating another walking path or not. So there's a group that's it's formed of 2 or 3 different organizations, but they are walking from various places in Europe to Jerusalem as much as they can, and they won't be here. They've just initiated the walk or the initiative for another 1.5 years. But I'm working with them now on how can they resource their peace walk to Jerusalem as a pilgrimage. And so some of the things I will be talking to them is for instance the concepts of pilgrimage in the kind of the footsteps of Abraham, who's been called to leave the home and go to the land that God will show him. And that experience of Abraham then, the whole time he's in Canaan, for the rest of his life, comes out through the New Testament, is the concept of being a stranger or being a foreigner. I was thinking even this week, I remember thinking in the past as a pilgrimage is a second place person. So it's a person who's left home and they're not home anymore, whether they're continuing to walk or wander, or they're just simply displaced or different. So I don't know how people would react to the word of thinking of a pilgrim as second place, because there's all different connotations to that. But it does describe this sense of leaving home, the sense of being called out of the place that's familiar and going someplace place different. So, I mean, I think if you're in that situation, you sense that pilgrimage comes with vulnerability. Pilgrimage comes with a sense of humility. And of course, if we see another person as a second place person, it's not second class, but we're recognizing their disconnection or their own vulnerability away from home.
How would you define pilgrimage? People have very limited understanding of pilgrimage. They're coming to the Holy Land, they're on pilgrimage. They may not even quite know what they mean by that, but it's just a thing you do. You are working in much wider and deeper concepts. And how would you help people to understand, when you get beyond just coming to the Holy Land, what you mean by pilgrimage?
Yeah. Again, there's multiple definitions, and it's more than just going to a holy place, because the English word pilgrimage brings together more than one concept. But there's one definition that I particularly like, comes from Richard Niebuhr, and he talks about a pilgrim as a person in motion passing through territories that are not their own. And he'll go on to say that they're looking for a sense of completion, or perhaps the word clarity will do, to which only the Spirit points the way. So I think even Niebuhr is picking up on some of this kind of Abrahamic sense of the stranger. So for many of us, if we would write a definition of pilgrimage, we know in our back of our mind that it deals with these concepts of the foreigner, the stranger, the sense of the unfamiliar. But most of us might talk about a trip to a holy place and back. But the sense of passing through territories that are not our own, the sense of a pilgrimage being a spirituality of uncomfortable experience, the sense of going from orientation to disorientation to new orientation. And if we think about kind of being away from home, being displaced, being second place, being in a territory that's not our own, then I think a pilgrim is not just simply a person who's traveling, but a pilgrimage is actually a status. I mean, we're in a state of being in which these conditions apply. And pilgrims often stop, they often rest, they often get confused. They often take dead ends. But to be a pilgrim, among other things, has to do with being away from home. And so with this group, I'll be talking about the sense that sometimes on pilgrimage we go to visit other people rather than places. To talk about the fundamental connection with seeing other people as foreigners or strangers. There's a long tradition, or certainly a tradition in the modern era, of pilgrimage being associated with peace movements. And I know I'm going through some of this very quickly, but maybe some readers or some listeners will pick up on this. There was a person just called the Peace Pilgrim, that an American woman who in the 70s or 80s, I think, walked 50,000 miles and referred to herself as the Peace Pilgrim. Right. There's peace, gatherings for prayer through the civil rights movements, for women's suffrage movement. And so pilgrimage has a long connection with kind of anti-war movements and all. And so certainly with this group, and I would love with further conversations with you and our listeners to explore more about pilgrimage is not just going to a holy site and returning home, but it's engaging the other, it's breaking down barriers, it's crossing boundaries. And so so there's a lot of what I call the social applications of pilgrimage that really takes us out into the world, out into the streets. And in many ways, it's akin to a form of discipleship. It's akin to a sense of having the character of Christ, a sense of humility. And so even as you hear me talk, there's lots of different lenses and different frames of what a pilgrim is. And just one thing maybe to kind of leave a thought-provoking thing. I think if you and I are just going on a journey, if for us to call it a pilgrimage, we would say we need to do it in some intentional way. We need intentional prayer, intentional meaning, because not all journeys for you and me might be a pilgrimage. That's a different concept of thinking that there are people that we could identify that do not mean to be pilgrims. The stranger, the refugee, the foreigner, the people who are displaced, second place, called away from home. So these are actually two different concepts, but they're both used a lot. People will say strongly that the word intentional needs to be a part of their definition experience of pilgrimage. And yet I know lots and lots of examples of how people working with refugees, migrants, ministry will see a kindred spirit of being fellow pilgrims on the earth with somebody who doesn't have a home, who's wandering the earth, who is less fortunate. And so, but just to wrap it up, what I am interested in is pushing pilgrimage concepts that engage compassion, mercy, and Christ-like outreach to others.
Well, and I think that's such a rich idea for us to think about as we start to encourage people to consider coming back to Israel, Palestine on pilgrimage, that it will be an even more complicated experience for many people. And we always try to help people to see way beyond just visits to holy sites, but the encounters with a variety of different types of people, your co-pilgrims and the relationships that are established there, crossing the boundaries, because there are so many walls and boundaries and fences here, and we pay attention to those things, and they're not diversions from the pilgrimage, they're part of the pilgrimage. So I think what you've said has given some very rich ideas for thought and consideration as people think about their own pilgrimages close to home, and hopefully beginning to think about coming back to St George's and to the Holy Land on their pilgrimage, and the sorts of issues that it will rise up within them. So thank you for another rich conversation.
Thank you.